The motto of the Minneapolis Police Department is to protect with courage and to serve with compassion. But George Floyd was not a threat to anyone. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He wasn't trying to do anything to anyone. Facing George Floyd that day, that did not require 1 ounce of courage, and none was shown on that day. No courage was required. All that was required was a little compassion. And none was shown on that day. George Floyd said, "I'm not trying to win." This was a call about a counterfeit $20 bill. All that was required was some compassion. Humans need that. People need that. But more fundamental than that, and more practical at that time, in that place, what George Floyd needed was some oxygen. That's what he needed. He needed to breathe. Because people need that. Humans need that. To breathe. And he said that. And the defendant heard him say that. Over and over. He heard him, but he just didn't listen. He continued to push him down, to grind into him, to shinny, to twist his hand for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. He begged, George Floyd begged until he could speak no more, and the defendant continued this assault. When he was unable to speak, the defendant continued. When he was unable to breathe, the defendant continued beyond the point that he had a pulse. Beyond the point that he had a pulse, the defendant continued this assault. 9 minutes and 29 seconds. When the ambulance arrived, the ambulance was here, and the defendant continued. He stayed on top of him. He would not get up. He would not let up. He stayed on him, grinding into him, continuing to twist his fingers, to hold him down. He had no pulse. He was not breathing. He was not responsive, and the defendant had to know what was right beneath him. Right beneath him. You saw the video. You saw the point when the ambulance arrived, and finally, after a paramedic got out, and the defendant still did not get up, and the paramedic tapped him, and finally the defendant got up, and they lifted Mr. Floyd onto that gurney, and you saw the way he was not, there was nothing there. His head had to be held to prevent it from falling to the ground. He was completely limp. The defendant had to know that. He was there. He was on top of him. And he was on top of him. On top of him. Sometimes you ask for the truth, sometimes you insist on the truth. And the truth is the defendant was on top of him for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. And he had to know. He had to know. The medical examiner would find the cause of George Floyd's death to be cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement's subdual, restraint, and neck compression. Well, what you saw the defendant and the other officers doing to George Floyd caused his death. The medical examiner ruled the death a homicide, death at the hands of another. What the defendant did to George Floyd killed him.